How's your dog doing? Linus can't decide whether to learn Hindi or Urdu, even though they're the same language linguistically speaking. Marcus Aurelius, on the other hand, is able to make up his mind easily through his clear, lucid thinking, rationality, and understanding of himself. So I remember I used to get very confused about what languages to learn based on a lot of factors, and a lot of them weren't even very relevant. A lot of them weren't even ones that I had. They're imposed on me by other people around me for things I didn't really care about. For example, the concept of utility. But that just led to me wasting a lot of time and not actually making progress in a language I wanted to learn. So essentially what I think the larger problem is that a lot of people have essentially, again, it's a similar conclusion as the last one, where a lot of people have kind of been set in a way where they will take in so many different factors, even if they don't really matter. Like, for example, if one of your factors for what language you should learn is something like the phonology and your ability to pronounce the language, that should not be a limiting factor for you. You can always get that later. There are certainly things that matter more than others. For example, one of the most important things you should actually be considering is the vocabulary. But I'll get to things you should actually be considering in a little bit. And so this kind of relates back to, I can't remember which video I mentioned it in, but it kind of relates to the 80-20 rule, which is essentially 20% of tasks will get you 80% of the results, and 80% of tasks will get you 20% of the results. And you should just focus on the 20% that gets you the 80% of results. So in this case, obviously we should be choosing the few things that really do make a big difference when deciding a language and which one you should be learning right now and stuff like that, rather than looking at all the little things like, oh, what's the phonology like? Oh, how many people speak this? Something like that, which doesn't really affect whether you should learn it or not. I mean, it can, I guess it's a metric you could base it off of, but it's not the most important thing you should be basing it off. You should not just be basing whether you learn a language or not based off of how many people speak it. Like, you can, but that kind of takes the fun out of it. So what we can actually do to essentially counteract this is to actually choose the things that are really important when it comes to choosing a language to learn and language learning in general. So first, if it's a natural language, not a conlang, that would be connection to the culture. For example, one of my big reasons for wanting to learn Latin was because I really like Rome. I like Roman history. So why wouldn't I learn the language so that way I could read documents from Romans and people from the medieval era and beyond? So I did have like a strong connection to the culture. Next, again, not very relevant, but it still can be because a lot of people seem to consider this for some reason, is utility, and I put that in quotation marks because a language's usefulness really depends on a lot of things. Most people will just depend it off of the number of speakers. But for example, if you live in Europe, just in general, it doesn't really matter the country specifically, and you're just going to learn Mandarin Chinese just because there's a lot of speakers, how many times are you actually going to find people that speak it? Like, just basing it off of the number of speakers is not very helpful. If you're just learning it for its quote-unquote utility based off of the number of speakers, that's not really going to help you if no one speaks it around you. So a much more useful metric would be how many people speak it around you to determine its utility rather than just the number of speakers. Next would be a similarity to your native language or any languages you already speak. So let's say that your native language is Spanish and you're deciding between learning Italian and learning Arabic, and you don't have any preference for learning one or the other at this time. So what are you going to base it off of? Well, Italian's a lot more similar to Spanish. It's a lot more similar culturally. It's a lot more similar grammatically, phonologically, just in a lot of departments, it's a lot more similar because they come from the same family. And they're very closely related languages in the same family. Also, just in general, if another language you're learning is similar, that's also just generally useful. Like, doesn't have to be related, but if it's similar to your native language in some way, maybe grammatically, maybe your native language uses a lot of cases and conjugations for verbs, and another language just so happens to do that as well. Well, learn that one. It's very similar. Or it could be similar phonologically, or easy for you to learn phonologically. Again, that's not an incredibly important one specifically, but you get what I mean. Vocabulary is also very important because some languages make more distinctions than others and some make fewer distinctions than others. Also, there might just be words for things that you don't know because it's a different culture as well. But if, say, you're learning Japanese, there's going to be a lot of loan words that have been rendered, as you could say, into Japanese from English, so that can make it a little easier to learn. Sorry if you hear any whining out there. I just got a puppy, so she might be a little upset I'm recording right now. And then lastly, an actually important factor is access to resources. If you want to learn a barely documented language with very few resources to learn it, it's going to be a lot harder than one that's well documented, plenty of resources. And even some well documented ones are going to be harder to learn. Like, it's going to be a lot harder for you to find resources to learn Polish here in the US where I live, versus if you live in Russia or you speak Russian and you want to learn Polish, because they're related languages, countries are more closely related in culture as well. So that's also a very important factor, because some languages produce better and more resources for other languages than others. For example, a lot of French and German books for learning other languages are a lot better than English ones, and also to a smaller degree Italian. Okay, so I hope this video was helpful. Hopefully it gave you some helpful things to consider when learning a language. Again, I hope my videos are still as useful as they were before, so just tell me if they're not. Again, I'm going to start offering some coaching calls. That's why things have been kind of delayed a little bit, because I had to get that figured out. I had to make like business accounts and stuff for that kind of thing. So, so again, currently I will only be taking 3 clients, one for Tokipona, one for polyglottism, and one for polymathy. So if you want any help in those areas, you can go check that out. Should be a link in the description. So then you can, book a time that you want for a call. And then if you really need to switch it, that's fine. I might even need to switch it sometimes. You never know what might happen. Maybe my dog has a medical emergency, you never know. Yeah. So I hope this video was helpful again. If you really want that coaching, you can go in the description. It'll be a great way to support the channel, so maybe I can finally afford an editor, so that way these videos can be made more quickly and they can be better edited as well. Other than that, that's all I really have to say. So tell your dogs to die.